And we're going to highlight a few of the clips that we think capture some of these practices. And we are releasing the deposition in its entirety. It is not complete. It is to be completed, but we think the public imperative is necessary to get it out as soon as we could, so we're here today to do that. Archbishop and his predecessors have promised zero tolerance. There has been an ongoing tolerance of sexual predators in the clerical culture of the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis. And they've made conscious choices to keep their practices and those predators both in safe harbor and a secret from the parishioners, the people, and the police. So we're not happy or joyous about having to share any of this with you. We're alarmed, we're sad, and we're scared. The more we learn and the more we see. Because there's been promises of zero tolerance and no priest in ministry, we thought we'd pick out a few that need to be highlighted. Let's begin with Ken Levan. Ken Levan, the Archdiocese officials found out had abused 2 minor girls in 1988. He worked as a retired priest in parishes in this Archdiocese until December 2013. The Archdiocese testified about this. So let's start with the Levan clip.
So the testimony you're about to give relative to the cause now under consideration should be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
At any time since your installation, have you received any information from any source that causes you to want to change any of the statements you have made about the safety of children in this Archdiocese?
Well, just in the last month, I did discover that there was a priest who had offended, who retired, but continued periodically to celebrate Mass on weekends. And I was not aware of his presence, and I was not aware that he was publicly in ministry. And as soon as I realized it, I had his faculties removed.
And who is that?
I believe it's Father Levan.
Levan was just recently removed under public pressure and exposure by us and through this litigation. 2.5 decades they'd known about him having abused 2 teenage girls. There are 7 others referred to in this deposition about whom we ask. The next is Michael Stevens. I'm not going to play that clip here, but he was convicted, criminally convicted of having sexually molested a child in the 1980s. He was continued in the Archdiocese to work in the Archdiocese offices, and within the last 10 years at several parishes, working as an IT consultant, allowed to be and continue as a priest. Recently, Stevens has been working at 4 to 5 parishes, and the Archbishop testified that he didn't know about this until recently. Stevens wasn't removed from active ministry until 2013, this last year. Hesselberger, Jennifer Hesselberger, the former Chancellor for Canon Affairs, warned Archbishop Neinstedt, it's in the deposition, that Stevens would not be even allowed to work as a layperson in the Archdiocese with that conviction, much less as a priest. Nonetheless, a conscious choice was made to continue him. The next is Gilbert Gustafson. Gilbert Gustafson is a priest that was convicted of sexual molestation. in the 1980s. Nonetheless, he was continued somewhat quietly at the Archdiocese, under the radar at the offices there in the 80s and the 90s. And then they've allowed him to do consulting work for religious organizations in the Twin Cities, including at Cristo Rey High School as recently as 2013. The Archbishop testified that only recently he learned of this. Gustafson. Gustafson is diagnosed as a pedophile, a compulsive sexual interest in children, and receiving payments through the Archdiocese for the diagnosis as we speak. The next is Joseph Gallatin, a name not known until recently. The Archdiocese knew, however, that he had committed, to use their words, boundary violations with a child, but wasn't removed again until 2013. The next is Mark Wayman, W-E-H-M-A-N-N. The Archdiocese knew that he committed boundary violations with children, and he wasn't removed until December 2013. The next is Michael Keating. The Archdiocese knew that he had been accused of sexually molesting a teenage girl. They allowed him, after he went through the review board process, to continue in ministry until we sued him and removed him the day that we sued him in October 2013. The next is Curtis Waymeyer, and Waymeyer has been known to have now been convicted. But let's look at Waymeyer as another demonstration of the choices, the conscious choices they've made to continue offenders in ministry without warning to the unwary.
When you read the St. Luke's report and received the other information you described, at the time you made him pastor and continued him in ministry, did you tell anybody at the parish what you knew about his history as reported in St. Luke's, as raised by Father Laird, or as raised by Jennifer Hasselberger?
At the time, I believed that that was the responsibility of Father McDonough. I found out subsequently that he did not inform the trustees, but normally in those situations at that time, we would have informed the trustees of the parish.
So when did you learn that McDonough had not done what?
I think it was in the last week of September
Of what year?
of 2013.
At this point in time, not one official at any time has been disciplined, has been reprimanded, has been suspended, has been in any way held account by this Archbishop or his predecessors for their role in this. Let's hear about how they are choosing to deal with one another and the top officials.
Have you any time reprimanded, punished, demoted, or taken any disciplinary action against any priest or official of the Archdiocese for their mishandling of child sexual abuse allegations?
I don't believe so, no.
Do you believe you should have?
No.
Hopefully there are some lessons to be learned here, like now. There's also a practice not only of keeping things secret, but there's a recent practice demonstrated by a conversation between the former Vicar General and the delegate for Safe Environment, Kevin McDonough, and the current Archbishop. Their concern is that we have been forcing them to come forth with documents and disgorging files and documents. So they became concerned that maybe they shouldn't put stuff in writing. So we asked him about that. Let's see what he said about that.
Did it ever occur to you at any time, or were you told that some of these things, conversations, shouldn't be put in writing because they could be discovered by us in litigation and known to the public?
I believe that Father McDonough once said that to me, but it was outside of that context. I can't recall exactly the date.
How long ago?
I don't have any recollection of that.
What were you discussing?
I don't recall.
Who were you discussing?
That I don't recall either.
Anybody else give you that guidance?
No, sir.
Anybody else present at the McDonough meeting when he said that to you?
It wasn't at that meeting. I didn't want to imply that. I don't recall the circumstances in which he had said that.
Yeah, I'm just talking about when McDonough told you that. Was anybody else present?
I don't believe so, no.
You must have been discussing something very sensitive at that time, but you just don't recall today what it was and who had been involved?
I don't, sir. I'm sorry.
You followed this advice, didn't you?
In terms of,
Not putting certain things into writing.
yes,
How many different times do you think you chose not to put certain things into writing concerning scandalous material such as sexual abuse by minors?
it wouldn't have been very many.
Well, very many. Does that mean more than a dozen or less?
My understanding today is that it would have been less.
Okay.
The choice to not put certain things in writing was obviously made to keep certain things from our attention and thus the public's attention. And not only the public and the parishioners, but the police. And we've long expressed concerns about their failure to report, their failure to disclose, their failure to cooperate with the police. So some questions turn to that. And I began in one area talking about Father Shelley, who in 2004 the Archdiocese learned was in possession of pornography, borderline child pornography, and had experts view it, and there were serious questions about it being child pornography. And those issues that emerged in 2004 were kept secret. And then Archbishop Flynn and his top officials made a conscious choice to allow Shelley to destroy some of that evidence, and made a conscious choice to keep some of the other evidence. Jennifer Hasselberger, the Chancellor for Canon Affairs, discovered that in the secret vault when they were considering promoting Shelley. And so she went to Archbishop Neinstedt, she went to Kevin McDonough, and she said, look, child pornography, we're in possession of it. Look at these images. Something must be done. This guy's not fit for ministry, much less we have some obligation to do something about this and not keep it in our secret files. And so I asked him about that, and she reports and documents that when Neinstedt refused to act and McDonough refused to act and said, put him back, never mind, none of your business, keep it on the down low, in effect, she insisted and actually pasted and cut some of the images. She showed them to McDonough, and according to the documents, she showed them to the Archbishop, saying, Archbishop, look at this. So let's see what he has to say about that.
And did you look at the images?
I did. She showed me some images, yes.
She claims that those images that she brought to you and showed to you were child pornography or borderline child pornography, and should have been reported to the police, correct?
No, I looked at those images and I could not tell whether they were adolescents or older.
It was a close call, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
Yeah. When you made the determination that you yourself couldn't tell on viewing those images whether it was adolescents or adults, did you report that to the police?
I did not.
You're a mandatory reporter, aren't you?
I am.
Archbishop Neinstedt, every top official in the Archdiocese are mandatory reporters. And that means by law, they are required to report any suspicions of sexual abuse, including suspicions of possession of child pornography, which is a form of sexual abuse, to law enforcement. You just heard the Archbishop testify that he made a conscious choice. He made a conscious choice to not report, knowing he's a mandatory reporter. And there's no evidence that he did, and there is a wealth of evidence that from 2004 till recently, it was not brought to law enforcement. We concluded the deposition with an expression of deep concern about the Archdiocese, this Archbishop, and his predecessors' refusal to turn information over to law enforcement. That is, keeping the files secret, keeping the identities of known offenders secret, and continuing to move offenders into parishes and making promises to the people that there's zero tolerance, that they're safe, and they don't have to worry anymore. And so we concluded the deposition with us urging this Archbishop to do what any responsible citizen should do if they're in possession of evidence of crimes. That is, turn the files that they have and the evidence of these crimes, both their role in them and all the offenders, over to law enforcement. And so we urge him to do that. And first ask if he has, and then end the deposition to be continued. But end the deposition with us urging him to do the right thing, the only thing that can protect this community, and the thing that we believe required by law. Let's see what he says about that.
Well, I'm going to ask you, will you turn the files over to the law enforcement agencies?
As I've mentioned before in this testimony, we've had a thorough review of the files by the Kinsale, and with they're still in the process of doing that, and I'm waiting for that results of that to be able to do exactly what you're suggesting.
The Kinsale is hired by you, aren't they?
Correct.
Okay, just like the Clergy Review Board is appointed by you, correct?
Correct.
Just like Center was hired by
the former Archbishop, correct?
Correct.
And just like the forensic investigator was hired. So the question I put to you, and maybe it's a request, why not just privately turn the files over of those priests to law enforcement to let the professionals review instead of trying to do this yourself?
Same objections.
Why not?
My answer would be, we are prepared to do what we have to do when the Kinsale file review has been done.
Don't you realize how risky it is and the danger that's posed by keeping all these things within your control and those you hire, and keeping it under the internal processes that you have instead of turning it over to the professionals who are trained in law enforcement investigation?
And I'll object again, counsel, you're trying to make sound bites. There's no evidence that the Archdiocese has not cooperated with any law enforcement officials, with any person that's been accused.
That's not a legal objection.
That is a legal objection, counsel, because you continue to try to create your own clips. And that's
No,
not...
we're trying to protect kids here. We're trying to protect kids, counsel.
Then
Give me
ask
a
the
legal
questions
objection.
about it. Ask the questions about
And
it.
I'm asking the Archbishop and giving you a chance to give the law enforcement people to know what your office knows by turning those files over to them privately and letting them investigate it.
Okay.
Why don't you do that?
We will, as I indicated to you, once we have the file review done.
Why wait? Kids are...
Counsel, we're done.
They are.
We're
What do you
done.
mean you're done? We're not done with this. We're not done. We're not done. This is the beginning of revelations that are to follow. They are in themselves deeply alarming and deeply disturbing, because when we began this work 30 years ago, these are the same kinds of answers we got, and after it was exposed, the same kind of promises made in the 80s that have been made recently. Zero tolerance, no offenders in ministry, and we've cleaned it up. And I haven't seen anything fundamentally change here in 25 years. And I'm sad and alarmed that we are today here revealing what needs to be revealed to protect the kids in this community, and they're making conscious choices not to. So the transcript in its entirety, with a few what we call redactions, is available here in condensed form. Here is the transcript. This deposition was terminated by them. We will be back in court seeking to continue it, and the questions that are yet to be asked, which are many. This is a beginning of a rollout of revelations that are now being turned over to us, and as they are, we're turning them over to law enforcement. So everything you see in this deposition and everything that's been turned over to us in this legal process has been turned over by us to law enforcement. So with that said, anything to add, Mike?
I think you've covered most of it, just process-wise. Within during these depositions and leading up to them, they provided us somewhere between 20,000 to 30,000 pages of documents on all the priests who had been accused of molesting kids in this archdiocese. We're in the process of going through those. We did have most of the people here going through those already, and we'll be working on those. There are some redactions that we need to make before we can make those public. But we have turned all those over to police, and the next step for us is to go through those and make sure that those are ready before we can release them to everybody here.
We did feel that it was important that we get the deposition of Archbishop Neinstedt out as soon as we could, which means today, and publicly known, because it really demonstrates to us an ongoing practice, not past, but present. And for that reason, there is a fierce urgency to make this known, and to make all the other things that are being known to us known to the public as we can and when we can. With that, said. We have nothing more to say other than the deposition itself in its entirety will be on our website. We have CDs here. Do we have any left? And we have the clips on YouTube, Mike?
Yep, on our YouTube channel.
AndersonAdvocates.com.